There are some stories that never really end, they just become part of the narrative. Then that story turns into a piece of history. One such story comes from the Konkan region of Maharashtra. Around 1980, there was a guy named Prathmesh who had a house, a wada, in Ratnagiri in the Konkan area. He left that house in the middle of the night. It was raining heavily, the roads were bad, and there were no vehicles around to travel. But in the dead of night, he decided to leave his home. Just think about what kind of situation he was in that made him do that. They left, and guys, they had a kid named Prathamesh. Prathamesh has grown up a lot now, and when he asks his parents why they never go back to their old neighborhood, his mom tells him that they can't go back there, and nobody can, because they've been away for so many years. One reason for that is that they left in the middle of the night when a guy showed up at their house. He claimed that the house was his, and honestly, he was nothing like a human. He was more like a demon. We couldn't say no to him, and out of fear, we had to leave that place for good. We left everything behind and moved to the city, and since then, we haven't even looked back at that house. So, guys, before we dive into this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more horror, mysterious, and historical videos. Now, let's get into the story. This story begins around the year 1980, but I want to tell you something about today. In 2024, everything happened with Prathmesh, which is what this story is about. By then, Prathmesh was getting on in years and had gotten married. His newlywed wife had this tradition in their Maharashtra family where anyone who just got married had to visit their family deity's temple, which was in their village in Ratnagiri. They were actually supposed to go there, but hadn't made it yet. It was all on their minds like, we really need to go, but guys, the last 40. No one from his family had gone to that village for years because everyone was scared about what would happen if they went there, especially since their ancestral home had a very different history tied to those people. But Prathamesh was totally modern in his thinking and was like, I don't believe in all this ghost stuff, magic, or any of that. I'm taking my wife Sandhya to the village. So, with that decision, Prathamesh and Sandhya set off for Ratnagiri. As soon as they arrived at their village, he noticed that all his relatives were gathered around him, standing there as if they were meeting someone important from the family after so many years. His cousin, Prathamesh, used to meet him regularly, even when he came to Mumbai. Everyone was chatting warmly, reminiscing about how small he was when they last saw him. But Prathamesh couldn't stop thinking about where his old home was. He asked the aunts and uncles around him where his grandparents lived, and everyone started looking at each other, wondering what he was asking. It seemed like the silence was broken when his cousin said, Hey, why don't you come over to my place for a bit? You guys can relax and change your clothes, and then we can talk about this. So he agreed and went to his cousin's house. Once they got there, his cousin said, You know, your grandparents just left that house in the middle of the night. No one really goes there because it has such a dark history. There's someone who's not alive but still seems to wander around. He said that even today, whenever someone passes by your house or that area, no one can stand there for more than 10 seconds because the negative energy is so strong. He mentioned that it feels like there's someone inside who's either doing something or peeking outside, maybe even laughing at us. After hearing all this, Sandhya was really freaked out. I was really scared, like, where do you guys even live? I didn't want to go there at all. But Prathamesh said those ghost stories are just stories and they're only fun to hear. His cousin kept trying to convince him, saying it's your own house, just stay here and don't wander around. Then Prathamesh said something really weird. He was like, Dude, I'm not going to check out the house, Sandhya, and if I'm going to stay somewhere, it'll be that wada where I grew up. They all wanted to stay there. Everyone had already settled in. Then Prathamesh, feeling stubborn, stood right in front of that old house with his wife. 5 minutes later, he was staring at a grand old mansion that had completely fallen into disrepair. It was in ruins, and no one had touched it for 40 years. The gate was wide open, just like it had been when his grandfather left the place. As soon as he opened the door, a huge cloud of dust billowed out. Inside, everything was a complete mess. The stuff is just the same in the kitchen, and the food is just sitting there like it was. The clothes are all over the place, like you'd see in a regular house. It really shows how his grandparents left the house in such a messy state. The money and jewelry are still just lying there. Then Prathamesh told Sandhya, "Why don't you try to clean up a bit? I'll go to the market and grab some vegetables or something to eat." He went out to the market, while Sandhya was busy cleaning her house. She wasn't thinking about anything else, and the stories she had in mind just weren't coming to her. While she was working in the kitchen, she noticed someone went by her and entered a room. When she turned around to look, he looked just like Prathamesh. She asked, "You're back, huh?" but got no response. So, she moved a little closer and asked again a couple of times, "You're back, right?" Still, no answer from him. As she stepped into the room, she noticed that there was a guy hanging from the ceiling fan, and he was saying, "This house is mine, not yours." After seeing and hearing all that, Sandhya let out a huge scream and started running out of the house. At that moment, the main door of the house slammed shut on its own. She desperately tried to open it but couldn't. It felt like the noose was around her own neck, and she was overwhelmed with fear and distress. He was filled with fear, and on the other side, Prathamesh was just getting close to his house when he heard loud screams and shouts coming from his courtyard. He threw all his stuff outside and rushed inside, but he couldn't open the door. Peeking through the window, he saw his wife, Sandhya, lying there unconscious, and a man who looked like a devil, about 6 or 7 feet tall, was approaching her. He tried to shout for help but was panicking and yelling at the same time. He kicked the door open and saw Sandhya lying there, but there was no one else around. The place was completely empty and silent. He splashed a bit of water on her, and she started to come around a little. Then she began to cry really hard. She said, "Ever since I've been in this house, I've felt like there's someone wandering around here, moving back and forth. I keep thinking it might be Prathamesh, that it could only be you, but every time I get close to him—" "So, that guy isn't really Prathamesh anymore. It's like someone else is living in this house. Something's definitely off with Prathamesh, and I feel like whatever it is has seeped into me." Right now, Prathamesh and Sandhya rushed over to his cousin's place and told him everything that happened to them. But Prathamesh was really pressing him for answers. "I've only heard stories about this, but who the heck is this guy?" His cousin said he's not just some random dude. He's actually one of your ancestors. There's a guy wandering around there. He's one of your ancestors who built this place years ago. After he made this wada, he stayed here, but he was all alone. Nobody ever helped him, and he ended up starving. He was in such bad shape that he had no food, no water, and no clothes. He would tell everyone about his hunger and struggles, but no one ever lent a hand. One day, someone was going to this guy's house for some reason, and that's when they found out he had hanged himself from the roof. After that, a lot of people tried to go inside the house, but nobody could make it in. They kept seeing this guy wandering around there. Then, a bunch of priests came to the house and performed rituals for many days. Eventually, they closed the front door of the house with some chants and stuff. A few more years passed, and then your Baba was at his place. There was a division of houses and land happening at that time, and your father ended up getting this house. After getting this house, he came here to live with your mother. The same thing happened to you and them. Our ancestors troubled them, and now it's happening to you too. Hearing all this, Prathamesh felt both scared and upset about the answer related to the ancestor. Then he decided to go to that house near Sandhya in the evening, and once inside, all the doors were locked up. They even locked the doors of that house, and then finally, she shut the gate and locked it too. She said that no one from my family will ever come here. Even though I got this house in the division, we have no claim to it at all. It's your house, and it will always belong to you. Whatever was there, she took the name of the ancestors, and then she left that house forever. After that, guys, that area in Ratnagiri, all the houses there, the place is packed, but this one lonely house stays so empty that nobody even thinks of wandering around it. Even though it might belong to that spirit now, you can still hear sounds of laughter and crying from inside. I heard that before that ancestor died, he went crazy, and ever since then, strange things have been happening. And before this video wraps up, I just want to say that the Konkan region in Maharashtra is absolutely stunning. Like, I actually belong from there, by the way. I literally would say it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to, and you should definitely check out the Konkan area. Just because of a couple of stories, nobody's reputation is getting ruined. If you think about it, a really fancy flat in Bandra, a sea-facing one, can have all these issues too. If you want to know about a super luxurious flat in Bandra, I'll drop the link for it in the I button. What I'm trying to say is, no matter how expensive a place is or where it is, people are always lurking around. They live there, and if you know anything about the history of a place, don't even think about going there. It's like you're shooting yourself in the foot because they've already figured out what to do with you beforehand. So, stay alert. Thanks.